This time on the show, we're going to be chatting with Jed Reynolds about ZFS. He's been using it extensively on a certain other OS, and we're going to learn a bit about the other side's implementation. So, of course, answers to all your questions and all this week's news coming up on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 90, ZFS Armistice, recorded May 20th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Hey, we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got an exciting show here, some good news to get to, and an exciting interview that we recorded a couple weeks back in Bellingham. So I think you'll enjoy that. That was a lot of fun to do. But before we get into that, of course, let's jump right into the headlines here. So first up, we got quite a complete article here about playing with sandboxing, getting somebody introduced to Capsicum.
Yes.
So
I've been wondering about this for a while. I kind of understand the basics, but I've never actually looked at it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I've compiled just a couple of little programs with it to mess with it, but not done anything too extensive. But I like the concept. But of course, for those who don't know, sandboxing and privilege separation are pretty popular topics these days with security and all, with the goal, and they're also the goal of the new Shell scripting language. They're used heavily throughout OpenBSD, and they're gaining traction elsewhere with the Capsicum framework. So we got this blog post here that kind of explores Capsicum in FreeBSD. It's also available in Linux, it mentions some of the history and where it's used in the base system. And then the best part is they include code samples, so you can actually verify that Capsicum's doing what it's supposed to do and denying programs access to certain system calls, which is the whole point of it. But definitely a kind of cool introduction with the code you could compile and play with yourself to get you started and get your feet wet with Capsicum and your first foray into sandboxing. Yeah, but we also... Oh, go ahead, Alan.
No, it's very useful. Some of the interesting things are, oftentimes your binary needs certain privileges, but once it's done with those, it doesn't need them anymore.
Yeah.
And so Capsicum lets you say, hey, once I enter sandbox mode, don't let me do those privileged things anymore. So I can open a file, then enter the capability mode, and once I'm there, I can't open any more files. I can only use the files I've already opened.
Correct.
And so then if someone does manage to find a buffer overflow or something and exploit my command, they can't do anything except for write to the files that I'm normally allowed to write to or whatever.
Which is definitely very cool. I think you might be able to lock it down even more than that. But there's a lot of neat functionality in Capsicum, and he shows some examples from the system sources as well, like the syscap get mode functions and syscall enter, and how those things are working internally. But definitely take a look at that. So Capsicum was enabled by default in FreeBSD 10. So if you're on 10 or later, you just have it and you can start playing with it now. And he also has instructions conveniently. If you still have a 9 box somewhere, you can optionally compile it into the kernel and then take it for a test drive.
Yeah. Looks like a very good walkthrough that, like you said, it's not just explaining what it is and telling you how you could use it or whatever. It has some code samples so you can get started with it easy. And, especially, it's usually a lot easier to learn it by starting with something working and then breaking it and fixing it and breaking it and fixing it.
Well, I learn best doing hands-on, right? I mean, I can read about it and the theory and whatnot, but until I can actually, run some code and run commands to see what it does, then it just clicks, So this is a good way for me to learn. I imagine there's more of you out there where this is more helpful as well. So again, a great blog post here. And also, if you're interested to hear more about Capsicum, we did do an interview about that a while back. So we have the link to that in the show notes, the previous episode called The Friendly Sandbox. So you can refer back to that if you'd like to find out a little bit more of the internals there. Yeah. Okay, next up, we've talked about OpenNTPD quite a bit, but it looks like it is now going to be enabled by default in OpenBSD in their installer. So they are confident enough to flip it on there.
Up until now, it's been a yes or no a question you get asked at the as you're doing the install. But who wants their clock to be wrong? So
right. That's right. So everyone just enter, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the first things they taught me in my security class was, hey, if you're going to do anything useful on the internet, you need to know what time it is so you can verify that certificate or, tell that something was falsified by being modified in the future, or, lots of different things. It all relies on knowing what time it is.
Having correct time.
Yes, and OpenNTBD has that neat feature where it can call up a random website over HTTPS and check what time that website thinks it is. While that's not accurate enough to set your clock by, it does let you validate the time server is telling you. So the time server says, hey, change your clock by, 5,000 seconds or a whole day or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not sure if I trust that time server. You can go out and check with somebody else and be like, does this number make any sense? It's like, oh, it does. Okay, my clock is just completely wrong. Okay, I will shift.
Yeah, having the basic smell test is good. Like, hey, that smells good, or no, something's off here. Like, that's just really a good idea. It was really, really neat to see them put that in there. But I'm encouraged to see if they're flipping this on by default in OpenBSD. Usually they're pretty conservative about what's on by default. So it makes me feel good that we're shipping with that in PCBSD. But of course, lots of problems can be traced back to time being wrong on one system or another. So hopefully this will eliminate a lot more of those cases. And for those who are curious about the HTTP addresses they're using, so they're using pool.ntp.org and Google for HTTPS constraints, but you can easily change those, and we have a link to our tutorial where you can take a look how to tweak some of those settings if you'd prefer to use your own site.
Yes, or if you just would like to have at least 2 or 3 different sites that would never be controlled by the same entity or something.
Yeah. Okay, next up we have a workshop that took place in Landshut, Germany. So we mentioned, we have a link to that with pictures, which is cool. And we mentioned, of course, that they were having an Install Fest in Germany a few weeks back, and then the organizer wrote in with a review of the event.
Nice.
So it pretty much ended up becoming a FreeBSD workshop session introducing curious new users to some of the flagship features of the operating system. I don't know if you got the picture you can show here,
I showed
Alan,
the picture.
Nice. Happy hackers.
Yes. When he wrote in, he was saying he was quite surprised at the number of people he got, and that's obviously a good thing. And, they talked about jails and ZFS and a bunch of other stuff. But they did your first steps in dealing with FreeBSD, but they're also looking at, in the future, doing similar events for jails, ZFS, Pixie booting, Ansible, firewalls, including PF and IPFW, and even OpenSense and PFSense, and also automated rollout of a complete company network using DNS, DHCP, file server, web server, firewall, etc., all with FreeBSD within 30 minutes.
So the half-an-hour install event.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I think they'll probably use Ansible, obviously, and then something like Foreman or something to manage the Pixie booting. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting approach to walk through all the different components on, a couple hours once a week or whatever. And then at the end to do it all together is one big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Kind of almost like a classroom approach there, where you wrap it all up and put it together.
Yeah.
Now, this is why we learned all these things. Now it just all works. Well, that's pretty cool. But for those who don't know, Landshut's about 70 kilometers away from Munich. So if this is something you're interested in and are in the region, can get to it, you may want to take a look at the links here and get in touch with these guys and attend some of these future workshops they're going to be having. And they, of course, ask for people to start your own, share your knowledge with others as you learn more yourself this way. So I think this is really cool. He even wrote them in English, but he held the classes in German as well. So it's neat to see it in non-English languages.
Yes.
Okay.
And lastly, we have a story about swap encryption on Dragonfly.
That's right.
So now they have an option with FSTab to automatically encrypt your swap just by setting the option in FSTab. I think the BSD one is similar, isn't it? You set something like that?
Well, the BSD one, you just attach .eli to the end of the device name, and then it automatically does a one-time ELI key or jelly key.
But yeah, so it's a more sophisticated encrypted swap using Lux, which is the Linux disk encryption, isn't it?
I believe so.
I didn't know that was ported to Dragonfly. That's cool. This was already available and could be set up via the installer capable of encrypting swap and your dump files. Manual configuration through Lux was a bit messy, though. So this feature provides a simple way to just encrypt swap with a random key via just setting the crypt flag in your FSTab.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been doing that for several years now. We just, swap should always be encrypted by default, in my opinion, so it just seems the safe thing to do. So it's neat to see that they have that here. So for those who don't know, full disk encryption, obviously everyone knows what that's doing, right? But people sometimes forget swap's important too.
Yes.
Sometimes more important because if you are
there's-
swapping, what if a password ends up in your swap unencrypted
Exactly.
or a key?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of sensitive data that could be in memory, or also your file system cache, all kinds of stuff, and the data gets pushed out to swap, and swap is just sitting there, and someone could read it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's actually, if anybody's ever wondered why a Windows server takes forever to shut down, is because of some government requirement, it has to go and scrub over its swap and overwrite it all with gibberish as it shuts down. With encrypted swap, basically you're setting up encryption with a randomly generated key and then throwing the key away, so nobody knows the key. Right? It's just not possible for anybody to have the key. And so as soon as you shut down and that key is erased from memory, it no longer exists and no one can read your swap.
Yes. So then you don't have to waste that extra time at shutdown.
Exactly. And also,
doing that
if you don't shut down cleanly, it still is scrambled.
Yeah, still rendered unusable, which is, this is really cool. And I think most operating systems have this now. So it's neat to see Dragonfly is putting that on. I guess it's not enabled by default, or is it an option?
They enabled it by default now in their master branch, but not in a release yet. It's still considered experimental at the moment because they haven't tested it if you are in like a low memory situation or if you're swapping a lot, how it performs. Also, their swap cache thing, which I think is where they keep some swap as a RAM disk that's compressed or whatever. They don't know how those work together at the moment because obviously you can't compress encrypted data. But I guess you could compress it and then encrypt it. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do.
Okay. Well, nice. So, of course, for the other BSDs, as we mentioned, FreeBSD, you can add a .eli to the end of the swap device in FS tab. We also have a link to the few steps you can do in NetBSD to turn on encrypted swap, and swap in OpenBSD, of course, is encrypted by default. So, definitely, if you're not encrypting your swap, you should take a look at that here sooner rather than later.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we go to our interview this week, we do want to mention our first sponsor, which is going to be IX Systems, who's starting off the show today. And it's going to be ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can go and fill out the information, get your guide you can download to purchasing a new server for open source, the things you need to know when you talk to management, the right lingo to use, and the case study on who your vendor is matters.
Yeah. Also, on their What's New page, they just got, they were at the Intel Solutions Summit conference in Texas, and it was interesting. They got recognized by the vice president of data center group at Intel, noting that IX had the best optimized solutions for open source communities.
Nice.
And talking about how IX isn't just selling hardware for open source, but they're also involved in it. Building PCBSD and FreeNAS
and all that. Yeah.
And, going to all the Linux conferences and all the BSD conferences. And, they're just really a part of the community. And it's interesting to see, a big company like Intel actually recognizing the value of that and the value of solutions actually optimized for open source, putting together servers where all the hardware just works on open source and you don't have to deal with all the trouble and so on.
Yeah, so when you purchase from IX, you're definitely supporting a company that believes in open source, uses open source, and is out there, putting their money where their mouth is and promoting it. I mean, as Alan said, there's a lot of IX guys who travel to a number of conferences every year, promoting this, and at Linux conferences as well. So next time you're at a conference, stop by and say hi to the IX guys and tell them you're a BSD Now listener. They definitely are familiar with who we are.
Yeah. Well,
cool.
I guess that's the great thing is that no matter which IX person you talk to, they will know who we are. And we most likely have spent quite a while talking to them as well.
Yes. So again, guys, that's going to be ixsystems.com. Don't put it off. Next time you guys need to get some servers, go ahead and give those guys a call first.
Yes, maybe you'll have some insider stuff for us next week, eh?
Yeah, I might. I'll be out there next week visiting with them, so we'll see what's new and happening. I think I'll be broadcasting from there, so stay tuned for that in the upcoming episode.
Hi, we're here joined by Jed.
Jed Reynolds.
Jed Reynolds.
Thanks for being with us today.
Here at Linux Fest, we're outside in the sun. It was raining earlier, now it's still sunny.
There's sun in Bellingham? What is this? This is crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't trust the weather farther than you can throw it.
Basically. You might hold that a little closer.
Oh, pardon me.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So we decided to interview you because you're a big user of ZFS on Linux.
I certainly am.
And we'd like to know a little bit about your experience with that. How's it been?
It's almost uneventful. It's that good.
That's a good thing
what
when you're
ZFS
talking
is
file
supposed to be.
systems.
Yeah. And Alan, you've been party to some of my more technical moments.
Adventures,
So you introduced me to this concept a few years ago when you started talking about it on the show. And so I immediately Googled for ZFS Linux, and I found the ZFS Linux site. And I tried it out on my Ubuntu workstation, and it installed. The only things that I have to remember to do occasionally when I do a big update, like a new kernel, is I have to just run a reinstall so it recompiles the kernel module.
Right, so the kernel module is in sync with your kernel.
Exactly. Yeah, because sometimes I'll reboot and I'll have forgotten to do that, and I'll say, "Wow, that DF -H looks really bad."
Right.
Anyhow, I've had no troubles at all with it on my workstation, and so I was so inspired. I built I went out for Christmas a year and a half ago and bought 16 1 terabyte, like 5200 RPM laptop drives, and two 5 gigabit super micro HBAs. So they're the 1 to 4,
Right.
1 to 4 fan out.
Mini SAS connector.
Exactly. And connected it up, and I have 4 RAID 1 pools that I stripe across, and I can regularly write at about 850 megabits to it. Megabyte.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm testing network speed. You're talking to a network guy, so megabits. I'm using IFTop when I record this.
Right.
I'm not looking at ZFS, zpool status minus V.
Right.
So yes, I'm sure I could do more to itself, but once again, they're drives with very little cache.
Right, that too.
But I bought so many drives, of course, I was banking on some kind of trouble. So the trouble came. Did a reboot. Things were not happy at some point, and I noticed that the zpool status was reporting errors, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta pay attention to this." So pretty much, I spent a weekend looking, like first stop, Newegg, order more drives, get those in the mail first, and then I go and I look at the scrub, and the scrub reports unrecoverable extents, and then that's when I asked you about how can I recover a few drives at once, because I had 2 drives in one pool that had bad extents. So eventually what I did was I went through and I rolled back the snapshots. I erased the snapshots that had the bad extents because they weren't
but they weren't the active copy of the data.
Correct. Yeah, they were backup snapshots, and I was able to do eventually 4 resilvers by the time that I had figured this out, because I had seconded the new drives and was up and running in a few days with repaired drives. So that's the most fun that I've fun asterisk that I've had with ZFS. But I was quite impressed. Something that I've never been able to accomplish, like multiple resilverings at the same time, and I'm quite impressed with that.
Yeah. Even I've had I had a RAID Z1, which can withstand one failure with a concurrent failure. 2 of the drives dying at once. One almost died completely, and as it was getting replaced, the second one was starting to throw errors. But I managed to keep it online just long enough to get the second one all the way back up, and then I made the second one and not lose any data. I had
a couple of you use RAID Z2 for everything.
Exactly.
Now, right?
Yes.
But that makes a lot of sense.
I managed to only lose a couple of blocks from snapshots I didn't need anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I managed to save myself there.
Yeah, it is a little bit more difficult to set up on CentOS than it is Ubuntu. Right. Ubuntu is really a snap. It's get installed ZFS-Ubuntu, and pretty much you're good to go, and then you can use your normal commands. On CentOS, you gotta pull in a lot more RPMs, and it's a little bit of a shame that there's not a CentOS repository out there that already has a meta package.
Yeah, you think at least, was it the EPL or whatever?
EPL.
No, that's not the one I think of. The one that used to to be at Rackspace and is now a community thing. IUS. IUS community.
Yeah, I don't. The last time I read through the overview repository pages, that one had not been maintained for a while, and then there's IUS, and then there's another one out there that is for like PHP 5.6 and MariaDB 10, and you'd think that would have good stuff. I won't get into any PHP stories now, but that would be a logical place to have something that was more along those lines. Anyhow, so I set up my my new workstation from my IX.
Yep, nice.
And it has 4 1 terabyte drives in it, and this will segue into the MSATA in a sec. And so so it has 2 Samsung 850s. 850 Pros to boot off of. I'm surprised IX still sells 840s, but anyhow. And the drives, and so I get the ZFS pool across the drives, and I initially set up L2 ARC and ZIL on partitions of the SSDs, and then as time permitted, I went and I wanted to try out this for MSATA adapter. So it's a PCIe 2E 4-lane card that's got 4 MSATA slots on it, and so I get 4 30 gigabyte, 500 megabyte a second write speed Kingston MSATA drives. Plug them in, and then I realized that this thing actually has jumpers on it. So I was like, where'd all the drives go? Set the jumpers, see 4 more drives, and essentially I just did them all as a striped ZIL, so that I can get all kinds of juicy synchronized write speed, because on all of my VM file systems, I have those set to sync always.
Right.
So it's not a great board. It's got a Marvell controller on it, which is consumer.
Yep.
There's other Marvell chipsets out there that behave better. I have a 2-port one from ABA or ABUS. I'm not quite sure which it is in my workstation, my stand-up workstation. The IX one I tipped on its side to put next to other stuff.
Sure.
But it doesn't support ATA flush properly, and it doesn't support smart properly. So sometimes something will sneak in those commands, and if I'm watching it, I'll see like 2 of the SSDs go 100% and everything else pause while it does ATA reset on the drive. Which is, so it's a good thing this is a desktop, because I wouldn't want that kind of surprise on a server.
Right.
Sure. Exactly.
You just get random performance hiccups.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the VMs I'm running are mostly for doing the occasional build, but mostly for networking. Right. So I put in a 4 gigabit port card in, and I've got a bunch of bridges on that for my other systems, which also have a similar bridging.
Yeah. So do you find that how's the documentation for the Linux side of ZFS on Linux?
Usually I jump to Google, and so I get a mix of your page, I get a mix of Evil ZFS Performance Guide, and I get a mix of the Oracle pages.
Right.
And the Oracle pages are really, really tiny font is the first problem, and they clearly don't maintain it very closely.
The URLs move around, and they're all from like pre-2010.
Yeah.
They're basically an archive copy.
Everything's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, they were formatted nicely when they were on sun.com, but when they just moved them, they didn't copy the CSS or something, and so they just the formatting of the pages has been mutilated by trying to make them look like Oracle pages instead of look like Sun pages.
Yeah, I pity the intern that was shoved that one.
Luckily, I'm guessing they don't work there anymore.
Yeah. Well, anyhow.
Well, and I know, with the Evil Tuning Guide, the Solaris Evil Tuning Guide, a lot of the information that's in there is actually not necessarily accurate for FreeBSD.
It can be harmful.
For Linux, I don't actually know if it applies or not. It recommends don't use partitions, use the whole drive. The reasoning behind that is
that was a Solaris.
Yeah,
issue.
Solaris disables the caching if you don't use the whole drive, the write cache. And on BSD that doesn't happen, and I'm assuming on Linux it doesn't either.
Yeah,
and so with the lack of documentation, it's always like, well,
that can be a bit confusing.
Most of the documentation is universal, right? Like the ZFS and zpool commands are pretty much universal.
Exactly.
It's only the system-specific stuff about how you.
It's kind of some of the implementation of like, this is how you want your best performance guide,
right? And that, like all the sysctls on Linux are done as like /proc or something, I think.
Well, the sysctls between Linux and FreeBSD are distinctly different. There's you've got various sysctls that are not going to appear in Linux at all, and we discussed some of those when I was going through my 24,000 snapshots or whatever that I built up.
You had 24,000 snapshots, and it was taking a long time to list them and delete them. At first when he mentioned it was taking a long time, he hadn't mentioned that he had 24,000 of them. So I thought he might not have the async destroy flag on yet, but it was more the fact that he had 24,000 snapshots on one data set. Well, they were recursive. So he had 24,000 on each data set.
That was my own snapshot command, and then after you discussed ZFS Snapper, I installed that, and I thought it was destroying snapshots, but it wasn't. It was something. I'd screwed up, clearly screwed up, and it was fun. So I was very surprised today when I couldn't write to the pool because the df-h said 100% done, but the sizes of the files hadn't been growing. I couldn't figure out what was growing, and then I was like, I know I've been doing a lot of snapshots lately. Let's look at that. And so like I do a ZFS get t snapshot -r, and it pauses. And it pauses.
Come back tomorrow.
Actually, it wasn't that bad. It was really only about 2.5 minutes, and it just started streaming, and a Control-C responded about like 3 minutes later. So I had a lot of snapshots, and deleting those was a big help. So I think I'm still at a few like 5,000, 6,000 snapshots on it, but it doesn't affect write performance.
No, it's mostly when you're doing metadata, zpool operations, like trying to create more data sets or modify or list or modify those specific snapshots. I find it's really good about not letting other operations interfere with unrelated ones.
I wish that I had ZFS 5 years earlier. Because I was doing LVM snapshots on CentOS. CentOS 5 something with MySQL, and as soon as I repooled the database, it would immediately start its copy and write process because every table was on a copy and write snapshot, so it had to copy these 4 megabyte extents, no matter how few bytes were being written to the table at once. So the database at that time
update is copying 4 megabytes of data.
It's a 4 megabyte extent. And that was a bit frustrating. So I'd have to wait like up to 20 minutes before I could actually mark a database pool node as ready until the disk activity like dropped system load back down to about 5 or something instead of like 50. Because it had queued up so much disk. So good fun. I'm using it to the thing that I want most, though, is I want Sun to get off its Oracle to get off its butt with VirtualBox, because VirtualBox really needs ZFS integration, nice close ZFS integration. I want to see raw VDEV support and
Chris and I were talking
integrated
about this on the live stream a couple hours ago, building a Qt web interface or Qt desktop interface to Beehive, and specifically
including ZFS.
Including all the
that
ZFS
makes so much sense.
Because, what we want is basically
ZVols and snaps and all that.
The VirtualBox GUI, but with ZFS built into it.
Exactly. Have you guys ever tried to delete a few snapshots out of the middle of like 20 VirtualBox?
Forever.
It's not even worth it. And I finally figured out the trick to that, and that is to essentially export it to a new VM. That does the condensing.
Have to do that, though.
You shouldn't have to do that. Exactly. So
as Beehive matures, developers, maybe this is something we
we just saw booting Windows for the first time.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah. Well, that's good fun.
So on using ZFS on Linux, do you find yourself missing some of the newer features? Like ZFS on Linux is, well, the features of ZFS, like large block support and, what's some of the newer stuff we have?
Right hole.
No, that's supported
whole birth.
Whole birth.
Do you have whole birth?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we went from 0.6.3 to 0.6.4 just last week.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah. Or 2 weeks ago.
I just wondering how many feature flags behind you are.
Oh, I have
Most of the ones like writing crash dumps across RAID Z is not something most people care about.
No,
but
not.
there's some. What's really interesting is the stuff that's coming in the next couple of months.
Oh yeah.
Resumable ZFS replication.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'll be-
VDEV removal. So if you have
nice.
if you have like you said like 4 RAID Z mirrors,
yes,
you could actually take one of those VDEVs completely out.
Oh,
It'll
wow.
remap the blocks that were on it onto your existing VDEVs.
Is this getting closer to the mythical block pointer rewriting?
No, block pointer rewriting can never happen.
Oh,
so this is a workaround to get one of the features we would have got from block pointer rewriting by basically virtualizing the VDEV and moving all of its blocks onto the existing VDEV so that you can take them out. So that you can, especially if you're looking at like a large SAN type device, you can decide that I want to take these two VDEVs out of it. So at Delphix, where Matt Ahrens works, they have like a big SAN and they make extents out of that and use those to back their ZFS. And they have like many separate databases sharing one big SAN or something.
Yes.
And sometimes they'll give it too much space though, right?
Yeah.
And so one customer or one database has too much space and they would love to be able to remove a couple of these VDEVs and reallocate the space. And so they built this feature. And so those are both open source now from Delphix and they'll be integrated into Lumos in the next couple of weeks and end up in FreeBSD. And I just wonder how long it'll take for Linux to get them.
Well, that's really the OpenZFS group question because that all flows up to OpenZFS.
Yeah, so it'll be arriving in OpenZFS in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
and I just wondered.
I don't pay close attention.
I'm sure
to
those particular features are so attractive that I think, unlike some things like the VDEV striping or RAID Z crash dumps, the Linux developers will be very keen to get those as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Oh,
resumable send changes my entire world.
Yeah.
I replicate like 500 gigabyte data sets of PCBSD packages across the internet.
Of course,
and those gigabytes cost me money, unlike doing it over LAN. And not having to redo it is really worth a lot
of sense. Yeah. More questions?
Do you have any more questions?
Well, you're using IX Systems hardware and you got ZFS. So have you played with FreeBSD or?
Why do I need to?
Well, just out of curiosity.
There's
I'm teasing you guys.
What would be the blockers to stop you from
okay.
using FreeBSD? Or is it just familiarity?
I am mighty familiar with, you guys are as familiar with your 3 package systems as I'm familiar with RPM, apt, and just any old tarballs and so forth. So that's really where my muscle memory is. And it's a matter of muscle memory, I think, because
I think it is for a lot of people.
There's just certain
we
commands
pop this
that
stuff
just make
right
sense.
out and just to get on our way. So I like the work that's being done and that I hear you guys report on the amount of file system advancement and the amount of network throughput, like the number of IOPS and so forth
like
on
the
those
work Alexander Motin did with getting IOPS.
Yeah, because that's the kind of stuff that I would like to actually integrate into Candelitech's testing is stuff that does have great high IOPS stuff because we already do NFS and CIFS testing over the network I shouldn't name drop, but you can ask me off air.
Okay.
And right now we're essentially doing it to RAM disk, something like that. And so it'd be very interesting to compare where an open filer versus a free NAS would compare just at that.
Sure.
Yep. Because I'll set up like 1,000 Mac VLAN endpoints, each running a mount command, and they're going up and down and they're writing somewhere between 64K and 512K to 1 to a gigabyte of file, and that's how we stress test some of these NFS platforms.
Sure.
So do 1,000 of those, and you get a lot of stress on a system. So it'd be interesting to see how they compare that way. Yeah.
Cool. Very neat.
Yeah. Do you guys have any Linux questions you could pop on me?
Well, I guess, so the way you install ZFS on Linux, is that still kind of frowned upon because it's not officially in the kernel and you're kind of doing your own thing? Or?
Well, no, consider the Ubuntu use case, and that is to play all your codecs. You go somewhere else to get your codecs, or you do an extra command.
Sure.
It's all a repository getaway. The whole restriction is what can they actually put on the CD.
Yeah.
That's really the barrier.
It's like the cannot distribute flag or redistribute flag in the ports tree.
Exactly.
You can have it in the ports tree, you just can't include it on the install DVD.
Here's a question: do you boot off the Z pool, or is this just a separate data store?
Since it's not available in an installable image, you would have to essentially
roll your own kind of thing to install.
Exactly. And there's a few paragraphs on that on the ZFS on Linux site, but most of the time I haven't had bad updates tracking long-term support Linux releases.
Okay.
So on Fedora, and we ship a lot of Fedora on our products at Candela Tech, there's only been 1 or 2 cases where it got away from us. But luckily, that was just in the lab.
Okay.
So I would say that the long-term Linux releases are pretty predictable, and you guys pride yourselves with that. So I'm not too worried about having the wrong kernel or something like that, because I can always reboot, and I haven't uninstalled the previous kernel, and that's what Grub is for. So,
well, have you seen what PCBSD does with Grub with boot environments?
You guys have been talking about that off and on for months, but yes, that's quite exciting. And
that would explain why I haven't heard, because I haven't seen any Linux guys, because like you have Grub, you have the kind of the main linchpin to do that, but if you're not installing to a Z pool,
exactly,
that's kind of the other
and that's the kind of thing that would be theoretically possible with ButterFS, but I'm not impressed with ButterFS, honestly. It's not, Chris hasn't given it a good name so far.
In particular, like Brian Cantrell said, when they were building ZFS, it was never in a state where it would lose your data. Right? It was always built to not do that. And before anytime before it ever went public, it never lost anybody's data since then, unless it was their own fault, doing something they're not supposed to or whatever. Whereas ButterFS, it's like, well, it's very young, let it get away with it. And Brian Cantrell's example was like, well, if your 12-year-old kid is stealing cars and running people over and stuff, you don't say, leave him alone until he grows up. When he's 18, he'll stop doing it.
Nice.
That's wicked. Okay. Good idea. So hey, it's been a pleasure to talk to you guys on air, and come harass me some more when you get the chance.
Definitely will.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's time to head into the news roundup where we got some cool tech to talk about, thermometers and whatnot. But before we do, we of course want to mention DigitalOcean being another sponsor of the show this week, and the coupon code for that, free BSD Now, which will give you a $10 credit that you can put towards running a VM for a couple months, which is a pretty neat way to try it out. I know I talked to somebody a couple days ago about setting up an URSI or a Quassel VM or whatever, and that's kind of a perfect place to do that. Plenty of bandwidth, and it'll be fast, and there you go. It stays on.
Yeah, because that's even enough RAM to actually have the database backend for Quassel, which makes it faster than the flat file or whatever it does by default. And yes, Quassel is amazing. But yes, DigitalOcean is great. And also, people that want to try FreeBSD but don't have a spare machine to try it on, a VM that you can spin up, you can snapshot, you can throw it away and start fresh. It only takes 55 seconds to get it started. So it's you don't have to walk through the installer a bunch of times. It's just a great way to play with BSD if you never have before. And, with this credit, you get you get 2 months of the play for free from us.
Yeah, they've made it so drop dead simple. It's just click and go, or they even have an API that's exposed, so you can programmatically build them and tear them down when you're done. And it's a pretty complete solution. So you definitely need to take a look at DigitalOcean.com And be sure to use that coupon code and get your free BSD VM just spun up and doing stuff right now. I mean, you could have that done here before we finish up the next item in the segment.
Yeah.
So
And
definitely go ahead.
don't forget to pick a location. You can pick where your VM goes. They have San Francisco, New York, London, Amsterdam, Germany, or Singapore.
And they even have a handy connection tester there, so you can check and see what the bandwidth's like from your location to that. So if you're going to be pushing big files back and forth, that's a great way to check it out. Or if you want to simulate something that's far away, another great way to do it.
Yeah.
So definitely go over there and get that set up today. Okay, so we teased it. Some cool new hardware, and you'll have to take a look at this here. I'm sure you can show the picture, Alan, but
I'm showing
a
it right
USB thermometer on OpenBSD. So, of course, maybe you've got BSD on your server or router, or maybe you've got NetBSD running on the toaster somewhere, but have you ever used a thermometer with one? So this blog post is going to be showing you the RDING Temp Gold USB thermometer, a small device that, of course, can tell the room temperature, and how to get it working on OpenBSD. And wouldn't you know it, OpenBSD has a native UGold driver to support it within the sensors framework.
Yeah, and so it just shows up as an extra sysctl, and has support for running multiple of them and so on. So when I first heard about these, I thought that was really interesting. And, the packaging has lots of broken English on it, describing about how, data record to file, dynamic curves. But with numlock, caplock, can directly read temperature through Excel or other text files. So basically, when you press a certain key, it will just spit out the temperature, apparently. And you can script this, so it would just keep logging them to an Excel file so that you could draw a curve or something. But doing this programmatically with the sensor framework in OpenBSD seems even better. And
definitely.
So as part of that, at BSDCan, where Dan Lengyel, who organizes BSDCan, has organized Embedded BSDCan, which would basically be a Hackers Lounge activity where people are bringing all their embedded devices and all the little gadgets like these temperature sensors to the conference, and everybody's just going to work together and play with them and see what they can build. So Dan is bringing 5 of these temperature sensors along with some probes that you can stick in the ground and stuff. And he wants to build something using a Raspberry Pi or something where he can monitor the temperature in his bedroom, his hallway, his computer room, and outside, and compare that with the temperature data from the weather people and see when the temperature changes outside, how quickly does the temperature in his house change?
Oh, nice.
Because he uses very minimal amounts of air conditioning or heat in the winter. And so he wants to see, how big of a lag is there between when it gets really cold outside and when it starts getting uncomfortably cool in the house. Or the other way around. It gets really hot outside. What can I do to maximize the amount of time it takes for it to heat up in the house? Because if you can do that long enough, then it'll be nighttime again already and it'll start cooling off again. And you can save a lot on your cooling bill.
Well, with all those devices, I imagine somebody will end up spitting out a driver for different things at BSDCan. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to hang out in the Hackers Lounge for a while there and play with some of the cool devices folks are bringing. Yeah, I have something similar out in the shed. That's what I use to monitor the temperature on the servers, make sure it doesn't get too hot. Or, as this last winter, we found out too cold. It does happen.
Also, if you're coming to BSDCan, bring your embedded stuff. But also, if you have a smallish portable monitor or something, that will probably actually come in quite handy. So especially if you happen to live in the Ottawa area and are coming to the conference, if you could bring some, the heavier stuff that people who are flying in won't be able to bring, that would be quite handy because, we're going to have all kinds of Raspberry Pis and 1 or 2 screens.
Yeah, you need a few screens to put them on.
But it should be fun.
Cool. Okay, well, speaking of little devices and embedded, NAS for free is now available on the ARM. So, of course, we've talked a lot about the different hardware you can use for your NAS devices on the show, but ARM doesn't always come up a lot. So that might be changing soon, though. So it looks like NAS for free is released an ARM build. These are somewhat...
Raspberry Pi, Raspberry Pi 2, and I'm not sure what that third one is. The Odroid C1.
Yes, but it looks like these are new and, of course, somewhat experimental still, but they are based on FreeBSD 11 current. So you will be running on the latest up there. And included in the list, of course, they have the list of what's fully supported and partially supported hardware that they've tested with. So if also we'd like to put the call out if anyone's tried this or is running NAS on exotic hardware like that, right into us. We're curious to hear about your experience with that and what some of the gotchas are for others who may be wanting to try that out.
Yeah, I've heard lots of people saying, they want to use their Raspberry Pi as a NAS. And, my first thought has always been, well, the network only does like 60 megabits. And, I'm spoiled. I'm used to my gigabit networking here or multiple gigabits. And, the fact that all your drives are going to end up being connected by USB. Not a big fan of USB hard drives and so on. But apparently the Odroid C1 manages actually 400 megabits. So that's much more acceptable performance. And I don't think the Odroid C1 is that much more expensive. And also the performance off the flash storage is 60 megabytes per second versus 20 from a Raspberry Pi 1.
That's not so bad for booting up. Well, nice. We'll definitely take a look at that. That's pretty neat to see that those are available. Okay, so next up, Package Source Con 2015 has released a call for papers and some info about the conference. It's going to be held in Berlin, Germany on July 4th and 5th. So coming up soon, and we have links to the announcements. They're, of course, looking for talk proposals and ideas of things you'd like to see there. So if you plan on attending or would like to, and there's some stuff you'd like to see talked about, definitely let them know. Maybe they can work that in for you. So, of course, if you or your company uses Package Source, or if you're just interested in NetBSD in general, this is a good event to go check out. And Berlin would be a neat location to do that in.
Yes. Well, Package Source is just so interesting because it brings together people from so many different operating systems and backgrounds. If we had a ports hackathon or something for FreeBSD, it would all be about FreeBSD, and maybe you might get some ARM and MIPS or people, and yes, Dragonfly uses that tree, but with Package Source, you end up with Linux people, Solaris people, all the different BSDs, it'll just be interesting to see. And I think also Minix uses Package Source as well, and so there's so many different targets, and it's such an interesting infrastructure. It'll be
definitely
interesting to see the conference.
As they say here, over 14,000 open source packages, NetBSD, SmartOS, Minix, and then, of course, Linux and Mac OS X. So definitely it'd be interesting to just see all the different projects represented at a conference like this. But if you can make it or in the area, definitely go take a look at the site. We'll have the links in the show notes here and get all the details, and you can go on out to that. Okay, well, next up, a sister show here, BSD Talk. Will Bachman over there has been releasing some new episodes. It looks like we got a new one. Episode 253 has just been released, and in it he's interviewing George Neville-Neal about the new second edition of the design and implementation of the FreeBSD operating system, which is a fantastic book. I know Alan has it, and I have mine still sitting up on my nightstand. I'm still reading through some different chapters in it right now.
Yeah, my copies are right here somewhere. Just out of reach. My copies are right here. They're just out of reach.
Just can't quite reach it. No, I read that stuff at night. I don't know. My mind just keeps going. It's like I need to read some more about operating system design because I'm weird like that. But hey, each their own.
You're designing an operating system, so it kind of makes sense.
It's important. But this great interview. They discuss what's new since the last edition, of course, who the book's target audience is, and a lot more. So Will Bachman's been doing this a long time. 253 episodes. Wow, Will. We're up to 90 now. Yeah. We're catching up to you, so we're going to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, just thinking by the time we get to 250, which will be 3 more years, I'm sure he'll have recorded just enough to keep ahead of us.
Right. He'll do it. He'll just keep saying a couple ahead. So. Well, excellent. So, go ahead and check that out. That's an audio-only podcast, so grab that, throw it in the car, and you can listen to it on your next commute. But I'm sure that'll be fascinating. George is always fun to listen to. And I don't know, is he running the Dev Summit this year?
No, that'll be Baldwin. John Baldwin.
He'll end up down
yes,
there.
He'll definitely be there.
He always does.
He's loud, so he's good at getting people to quiet down.
That's right. So, definitely go check that out. And before we wrap up the news wrap-up here, just a quick mention, we did release our PCBSD 10.1.2 quarterly update this last Monday. So that is now officially available for a full list of all the features and whatnot that's in this. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. So you can refer back to that and see what's in there. But it's available now. So go ahead and hit up the website for a download.
Yeah, actually, I think the workstation in my basement is already auto-updated to this.
See? Well,
it's the one our student uses.
Yeah, see, that's what I should mention too. If you're already on 10.1.1 and the automatic updater is enabled, which is the default, you should have already updated to it sometime this last week.
It's been kind of an interesting experience to take yet another brand new person that's never used BSD before and just stick them at a PCBSD desktop. And him, because he'd used Linux before, he was right at home in KDE and changed some keyboard shortcuts and he was good to go. But in the previous guy had only ever used Windows. And sat him down at PCBSD, and he really didn't have any trouble doing anything especially because of KDE, there's something analogous to a start menu, and it's in the right place, so it's easy enough to get started. And then, beyond that, you give them the same.
Those are the kind of stories I like hearing to see what pain points there are for people coming not from a Linux, but even from a Windows. Like if you've never used open source at all, like what's the first impressions and what are the blockers?
Our only major complaint was that the SVN plugin for KDE sucks.
Oh.
He was used to using Tortoise SVN on Windows, which is very nice and well featured and has great stuff for merging and all that. And the SVN plugin for KDE, if you do a second commit and the commit message is shorter than the previous one, the leftover text from the previous one is tacked onto the end. Like it doesn't flush the buffer properly or something. It's horrible.
Yeah, that sounds like a bug that needs to go up.
Inconsequential or incomprehensible commit messages. It's like a new message and then part of the old sentence or whatever. It's crazy.
Okay, so time for feedback and questions from you guys out in the audience. But before we do that, of course, let's mention TarSnap. And the URL for that is tarsnap.com. And, of course, /BSD Now, because why not? Where you can go there and get set up and start doing your encrypted backups right now before you start having data corruption or the disk dies on you or the system gets stolen or a fire or some other tragedy takes out your precious data, which is usually impossible to recreate. So you do not want to lose anything. TarSnap makes it super simple, and because it's encrypted, all encrypted before it leaves your box, you don't have to worry about who may be on the other end wanting to peek at your data.
It's deduplicated first as well, so it also saves bandwidth.
That's right.
I've been doing incremental backups twice a day of my important files for work, my business files, and the 12-hour snapshots, because they're mostly text files and so on, is minuscule and doesn't use any bandwidth. So it only took a little bit of time in the very first time when I set it up to upload all the old data. But since then, it's just been tiny little bit of incremental bits.
Yeah,
and
just the little changes. And it's really super simple. And of course, having the word tar in there indicates a tar-like interface, right? So if you guys know how to use tar from the command line, you're already 90% of the way there. The rest of it's really simple, and there's nice docs for that. And they make it super simple to get set up because they have clients for just about everything under the sun. And hey, if you don't trust binaries, why don't you compile it from source? Because you can do that too,
exactly.
Which is very nice.
That's one of the most important things is you can't trust the binary you get from Dropbox or some Spider Oak or any of the other places. But with TarSnap, you can read the code, compile it yourself, and know that exactly the code you read is exactly what made the binary that you're running.
That's right.
It's the only one you can trust.
Definitely. So again, guys, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. And if you talk to the guys over there, let them know that you heard it here. Okay, first up, we have Dominic writes in about a BSD install fest.
This is the one from Landshoot that we showed the picture from, but the rest of the email was quite interesting. So we thought we'd mention it down here as well. So he says, as promised, here's my review of the workshop we did last Friday. He said it was a very nice event, and he had 12 people that attended. For Landshoot, which is kind of a small city, he said that's a very good number, and he was quite happy about that. He wasn't expecting quite so many people, and that worked out quite well. He also said the technical level of the people was very high, which helped a lot. It meant they could dive into stuff and do more interesting things. He hadn't expected quite so many good and qualified questions, and so he said it made it a lot of fun.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what we love about the BSD conferences, is getting to be in a room with all those people like that and get to
kind of feed off the energy.
Yeah, but also getting to talk the language and actually have people understand you, and it's a very different feeling. And he said,
nice.
What I've learned was that this type of event is more than needed. He said, I'll write a blog post about how I set up the event itself within the next few weeks and share it with others so that they can do it themselves as well. He said it was quite easy, and he's willing to share all his presentations and talks with others so that, if you want to have an event but you don't know what to talk about, you can base it off what some of the topics he's already come up with and already written.
And use the materials they've already developed.
He says he hopes this will help to encourage more and more people to share and have more local events and, organize them like he did. I'd love to have one here, but as far as I know, there are no other BSD people around. But maybe if we put out the call for it, we can find some more people. And he says, by the way, of course, he mentioned the show to all the guys and your site because of the tutorials and also the information in the show. Some of them knew you already, but a bunch of them hadn't heard of it before. So exactly.
Thank you, Dominic.
And he says, for Chris, when I mentioned that some of the features like Life Preserver, Warden, the Grub integration with boot environments of PCBSD in his talk, he said he got a very impressed feedback from people. He got very interested in that. So he might have to do a dedicated PCBSD talk one week, just showing off all that cool stuff.
Okay.
And he says, as you can see from the blog post, I've researched and lined up because he's got all the feedback and so on. And he said the list isn't complete of what he's going to talk about, but he's already invited others to have talks as well to kind of mix it up a bit instead of just doing him talking all the time. And he's looking forward to having lots of good BSD talk in 2015.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Well, next up we have Brad who writes in, and he said, hey, I have a ton of questions regarding my desktop machine. It's currently running PCBSD 10.1.2 on the Edge package set, which is, for those who don't know, that's more of our bleeding edge package set that we update usually weekly, and production is updated quarterly. So he sends in the info about what versions he's got. He said it's running on a AMD Phenom X4 CPU, 16 gigabytes of memory. He may be doing a tech refresh and going to an Intel board and chip to replace the AMD stuff in the next month or two. He said, however, the crux of my question revolves around the hard drives in ZFS. My current hard drive is Samsung SpinPoint 1.5 terabyte. As best as I can tell, is suffering from bad sectors. He said, I'm constantly seeing messages similar to the ones below in D message. And then it prints out what we see typically when we're seeing write problems or read problems on FreeBSD.
Definitely the hard drive dying there.
He said, nothing jumps out at me in SmartD. However, my scrub shows errors as well.
It would be interesting to have his actual smart output because those should show up there as like currently pending sectors or something to that effect. And any number other than 0 there is bad. And you'll usually notice that number only ever climbs as it gets worse and worse. And so that's usually an indication that you really want to replace that drive as quickly as you can.
So he also sends us his zpool status, which shows that one or more devices have had errors and permanent errors have been detected in one of the following files, and he lists that
luckily
here.
for him, looking at that error there, it's the copy of a block and a snapshot. So if you just delete that snapshot, the actual broken sector won't be there anymore. So the fact that you can't read that snapshot is better than if it had got the live version of the file.
Yes. So he said the scrub's unable to fix the error, of course, because you're running off of one disk.
Yeah, he only has one drive, so there's nowhere to get a copy of that file from.
Yep. So he says, I'd like to do is replace the drive with a 120 gigabyte SSD plus either a 750 or 2 terabyte spinning drive. So what I'm looking for is the best way to utilize these and have the least disruption to my system. So he said, what I've considered doing was doing a ZFS send to my FreeNAS box, but I have a number of questions. Will a ZFS snapshot of one drive size, 1.5 terabyte, overlay onto a smaller or larger size, either the 120 or 750 gigs? So you're only sending over the actual data used. So even though your drive may be larger, for example, I have a terabyte SSD here, right? But when I send my data set over, it's only 100 gigabytes. So if I had to, I could restore the whole thing on a 150 gigabyte SSD or 200 gigs because it's only the data used that counts in this case.
So basically it depends how much data you have. If the actual used amount of data will fit on the smaller drive, then you'll be fine. The other thing, a nice thing with ZFS is because your data is broken up into data sets, you could back up part of it to one drive and part of it to another drive, right? So if you
or restore them selectively to one disk.
Yeah, so you could, for example, restore the operating system to the 120 gig SSD and the home directories to the 750 gig spinning drive or whatever.
So he says, how do I get the base system onto the SSDs and the extras onto the spinning disk? He says 120 gigs should be plenty of space on the SSD for the base system, user local and home, everything except for slash data, which would go on the spinning drive. Do I need to set up 2 separate Z pools? Yes. One for the SSD and one for the spinning drive. So yes, in this case, I would do the install with the PCBSD install media to your SSD, and then post-install, you could set up a new Z pool and just feed it your secondary, your larger spinning disk, and set it up as slash data or wherever.
Depending how you use the system, you might want to put your home directories on the spinning drive just because that's where you tend to save most of your stuff. But I can also...
Yeah, like here, it's where I download big ISOs and stuff.
But I can also see where you would want, your settings files for, Firefox and so on to be on the SSD so they read fast. But ZFS will take care of that with your RAM anyway.
So one way I cheated with this on my desktop was, I'm not doing it at the moment, but when I had a smaller SSD, was my home directory was on the SSD, but then I would make a symlink for like the VirtualBox directory to slash data.
The downloads directory.
Yes. So those would actually, it looks like it's in my home directory, but really it's pulling it off the spinning disk. So that's one way you can cheat with it and all that. Let's see here. He says, my ultimate goal is to set up ZFS sends on the PCBSD box to the FreeNAS, but also from the FreeNAS to the PCBSD box, so I have snapshots of both in separate locations. He said, I've been reading online. I think I can point a send to a specific directory, in which case I should be able to set up a directory like Luna, the FreeNAS box on Defiant, and vice versa. So, you could replicate to a specific data set.
Yeah, or to a new data set, and
Yeah, that's very doable.
It definitely lets you keep them separate.
That's what I back up here. So the way we do it with Life Preserver here is you point them. So I have 5 or 6 desktops I back up all to one FreeNAS box, and they all back up to the same dataset directory, but then Life Preserver automatically puts them under host name as well. So in that backups dataset, I'll have my desktop host for my main work system, my wife's system, etc., and keeps them organized that way. He said, should I be thinking about redundancy for the VDEVs? It is a desktop machine rather than a NAS, which has RAID Z2.
Even for my desktop, what I did with my desktop is I went with 220 gig SSDs, mirrored them, and then over the network to my NAS is where I do all my bulk storage. So instead of having, the 750 gig or 2 terabyte spinning drive in my machine here. Because, I have a gigabit LAN, and ZFS on the other end means it saturates it no matter what I'm doing, basically.
Sure.
And so it's effectively as fast as actually having the spinning disk in the physical machine here. And it let me have mirrors on the SSDs so that I could, make if one of those dies, my machine doesn't go away.
Sure.
And so you might consider that with your desktop there is, my first reaction when you thought, well, I have one hard drive and it's dying, so I'm going to get a 120 gig SSD and then a 2 terabyte spinning drive. It's like, well, if for the same money you could get 2 750 gig spinning drives and mirror them, it might not be quite as fast, although ZFS will try its best to make it as fast as it can. Having 2 drives that you can mirror will just offer you more reliability than 2 separate drives that can individually die and take out all the data that's on them.
Well, and that means next time you ran a scrub, it would have been able to repair the bad file here because it could have pulled it from the other one and you could have kept on rolling without worrying about that. So he says, do I need to do anything out of box for PCBSD or ZFS to make it play nicely with SSDs? He said, I think in Linux you have to force it to enable trim support, etc. But I'm thinking that ZFS should enable all this out of box. So with PCBSD 10.0, we turn on all the options for making it work on SSDs out of box. So there's no setting you have to specifically click or anything. It just does its thing.
It'll detect this in SSD with trim support, and then when you add it to the Z pool, it'll take a minute as it trims the entire drive before it starts so that it's in known good state. So it'll be all fine with SSDs.
Cool. So he said, what's your recommendations for best practices of setting up this collection of hardware? Love to hear your thoughts. He wants to do it sooner rather than later. Well, hopefully we're getting to this soon enough for you. But I think we've given some good advice here on how we would set it up. But do you have your thoughts, Alan?
SSDs are very attractive for the performance, but if you need more space than that, if you have this budget to set it up, I'd rather have the machine be a little slower, but have the 2 drives so that my files aren't just going to disappear. But then again, if you are backing it up to your FreeNAS with the Life Preserver or manually with ZFS Send on a reasonable, often enough, then you probably can get away with the 2 separate pools.
So yeah, I only have the one drive in mine at the moment, but I am backing it up daily.
Right.
And so at the end of work every day, everything gets backed up. I could do it more often, but I'm pretty comfortable with that at the moment. If I do something important, I can kick off an extra replication and snapshot from the tray. But yeah, I mean, as long as you got a backup offsite, you can always get your data back, although it'll be a little bit more of a pain because you got to grab another drive first. Okay, well, next up is Corvin, who asked some ZFS questions here. Gosh, ZFS is popular.
It's almost like someone should write a book about it or something.
Right? We need a ZFS Now show.
Yes, we'll just change that's what we'll do for episode 100. We'll just rename the show to ZFS Now.
Yeah, ZFS Now. Nice.
Well, except for apparently we can't agree on the name of the show now.
That's right. We'll say it different. And,
It'll confuse people. And yeah.
Okay, well, he says, hey guys, I've got FreeBSD running inside VirtualBox on FreeNAS for lack of a better option right now. Both use several gigabytes of ARC, which appears like a waste to me. He says, would it be a good idea to reduce the ZFS ARC max in the FreeBSD VM? He said, since I've got host IO cache turned on in VirtualBox, could that have an impact on the file system consistency?
Well, with ZFS, it can't ever make this put you in a spot where your pool is inaccessible, or like you couldn't, if you rebooted, your pool would be broken. But it might cause the last 5 or so seconds of writes you did before the VM crashed or whatever, or the host crashed, to be undone. Because they were partially written and the Uber block wasn't committed all the way. And so, yes, there is a small risk there, but because ZFS can recover from that, and it's not going to leave you with broken files like other file systems, because they overwrite in place, you would end up with the original copy of the file half overwritten with new data and half not. And that would leave you with a completely unusable file in most cases. Whereas with ZFS, because you're writing to a different spot, it means that there's always a good version of the file available. And so ZFS takes care of most of that problem. As far as reducing the ARC size, you probably can actually do well lowering the ARC max in the VM and raising it on the host, because the VirtualBox is then accessing the files via the ARC that way. So that can help. You can also, in addition, or instead of just lowering the ARC max, you can set the property primary cache on the root of the Z pool. So ZFS set primary cache equals metadata or none, and then ZFS will just not use the ARC inside the VM. Instead of making it small and making ZFS do all the work of like deciding what to put in the ARC, you can tell it just don't even use the ARC, or only use it for metadata, right? Keep the list of files and stuff. So when you do LS is fast, but don't actually try to cache any of the data, and then the ARC outside on the host can handle that part.
On the host does it. Okay.
So yeah, you might want to just do ZFS set primary cache equals metadata, and then the name of your pool, and that'll do that. Also, if you check back a couple of weeks ago, we covered the OpenZFS office hours, and we talked with Justin Gibbs about best practices for running ZFS inside a VM, and he had some ideas there, where one thing you might want to consider doing is not actually having a disk in your VM and having it be an NFS mount of a file system from your FreeNAS, and then you don't have any of that. ZFS stuff is all happening natively on the FreeNAS that way.
Nice. Okay. Well, he does say here, eventually I want to replace the FreeNAS with FreeBSD without the VM. So he asks, will I be able to mount the ZFS created under FreeNAS under FreeBSD 10.1? How do I check for compatibility? So I believe all the flags in FreeNAS 9.3 are available in FreeBSD 10.1. They've backported them all, and those would be like the feature flags for your Z pool.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be anything in FreeNAS 9 that wouldn't be available under FreeBSD 10.1.
No, I think it's all there.
Yeah.
To be 100% sure, though, you could always just boot up off a FreeBSD disk and just import the pool.
So if you just boot off the installer disk and drop to a shell and just do zpool import, it'll list all the different pools it's detected, import your pool, and you can poke around on it and make sure. But
as long as
yes,
you can get to your data there, you should be in good shape.
The entire idea behind ZFS is that you can take that Z-pool out of your FreeNAS, mount it on FreeBSD, Illumos, Linux, Mac OS X, anything that has support for OpenZFS. Your pool, you can just move it around between machines. Hopefully someday ZFS will become the replacement for FAT32 as the compatible file system you can use on anything to move your files around.
Universal.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, well, last up, we have James here asking about disk space. He says, I have a 6 terabyte external HD, and I'm fairly certain that on NTFS and ext4, I would get 5.5 terabytes usable space. But when I mount DA0S1, it says it's only 5.3 terabytes in size with 4.9 terabytes usable. gpartlist DA0 says it's 5.5 terabytes. He said, I couldn't find anything via Google besides a forum thread, the exact same issue, no responses. I also asked in FreeBSD on Freenode, but no response. I'm quite new to BSD, so I'm not sure if it's just a UFS GPT that needs the space. I've rarely used both, or if I'm messing something.
When you format a disk with UFS, it reserves by default 6 or 9% of the space only for root, and it doesn't show up as in the usable space. But as far as the actual size, that's mostly just a factor of the way they factor it. A 6 terabyte drive is 6 with 12 zeros after it. But a kilobyte is 1024. And so when you divide that down, you actually get 5.45 actual terabytes. And so that could be a little bit of rounding or whatever. And then, if gpartlist says it's 5.5, then it's probably that. Although, do you have any other partitions? Like if you have a couple gigs of swap on there, that could make a difference, but probably not that big of a difference.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you lose a little if you do 4K alignment, et cetera, or might leave a little extra space at the end.
Yeah, but that's
not terabytes or gigabytes worth.
If you actually give us the output of all the different commands you're talking about, we can maybe help you understand what's happening there. But in general, yes, UFS, if you read the man page for it, and you can set this during NewFS so you can control it, but it by default reserves about 9% of the space so that only root could fill the rest of the drive, so that a malicious end user can't fill your drive all the way to the end to stop your logs from working. So it stops a user at the last 9% so that syslog can keep logging what they're doing after that.
Yeah, this is what's happening. Oh, cool. Well, again, if you have that extra info and want to send it in, we can, of course, look a little closer at it and give you a more definitive answer on a future episode. So as we wrap up the show here, of course, guys, we want to remind you to send your questions, comments, or any ideas or topics you'd like mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. And please only send it there because that's the only place we're monitoring. Yes. I mean, Twitter's nice. Sometimes we get on Twitter and whatnot. But if you really want to be sure we see it, you got to send it to feedback@bsdnow.tv.
Yeah. So, if you have an idea for an interview you want to see, or just you have a question, or you have a topic you want us to talk about, or whatever you have, we'd love to have it. And, you guys have to do stuff for us to make the show, right? The show consists of highlighting the stuff that all you people out in the community are doing stuff, and we're just showing it off. So if you're not doing anything, we can't talk about it. And if you don't tell us about it, how are we supposed to know?
Yeah, no more secret projects.
Yes, why do we have to dig for this stuff? You guys should be telling us about it.
That's right. So also, if you know somebody who's working on something and you want us to line up an interview with them, or there's some cool project out there you're aware of, let us know as well, and we'll try and get in touch with them and get that scheduled.
Yes.
And also, we're getting close to 100 episodes. We're at 90 now, so it's just around the corner. So if you guys have some cool ideas you'd like to see done for the 100th episode, do let us know. I think that would be fun.
Yes, it would.
So anyway, we will be back same time next week, folks. So thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to talking to you again next time.